Welcome back to Take Care Time, the tales and exhales of caregivers, where we dive into the world of caregiving with stories, insights, and plenty of heart. Today, we're doing a little something different. Instead of our usual format, we're turning our spotlight on you, our listeners, with a special Q&A episode. Over the past weeks, since we started this podcast, we've received some fantastic questions from our community, and I'm excited to address them today. From practical caregiving tips to behind-the-scenes podcast secrets, no topic is off limits. So let's dive right in. Our first question is from April, and April wants to know what inspired me to start Take Care Time podcast. So I think that's absolutely a great question. And what inspired me, a lot of people don't know, but you know now that Take Care Time is an actual brand. So there was already a brand in place before we started the podcast. And the inspiration behind starting the Take Care Time podcast stemmed from my deep passion for caregiving and a desire to create a platform where caregivers can find support and inspiration and a sense of community. I really want to encourage caregivers to practice self-care because caregiving is hard. I am the mother of an adult daughter with autism, so I've been her caregiver her entire life. And I know firsthand the toll that it takes on you. And I hate to say it like toll, but it does take a toll on you. I've witnessed firsthand the challenges and the joys and the complexities that come along with caring for a loved one. I want to channel my experiences and my expertise into a podcast that not only educates and informs, but also provides a space for caregivers to feel seen and heard. So what better place than here? I want caregivers to be understood, and I thought through storytelling, interviews, discussions, we could do it that way. Take Care Time also aims to shed light on the diverse experiences of caregivers because everybody's experience is not the same. So we offer practical advice and foster a sense of solidarity among listeners. Ultimately, my goal is to empower caregivers to navigate their journey with confidence and compassion and resilience. So I hope that answers your question. The next question is from Constance. And Constance wants to know if I could share a little bit about my background, experience in caregiving. And yes, Constance, I would be happy to do that. Like I said in my previous question, I am the mother of an adult daughter who has autism. She's 30 years old. She'll be 31 this year. The majority of my experience has come from being a mother. A few years ago, I took classes to become a certified caregiving consultant, educator, and advocate. And those certifications have allowed me to expand my business and become an author and meet other professionals in the field. So thank you, Constance, for that question. Let's see here. We have Joanne. She wants to know some of the common challenges caregivers face and how do you address them on the podcast? Well, Joanne, so far the podcast has just been the tales. So we've done 2 series for you to listen to. And, we haven't really expanded real big yet, but we are. We have things that are coming in the pipeline. But I will say this, that one of the most pressing issues facing caregivers today is the multitude of challenges they encounter on a daily basis. And it's coming from all sides. You have to navigate the healthcare systems and your own emotional well-being. Caregivers often find themselves in uncharted territory. Sometimes, it's not like you can look down the line in the future and say, okay, in this year, I'm going to become a caregiver. Sometimes you're just thrown into it. And I'm really kind of speaking for family caregivers. It's not like we went and applied for this and we got accepted for the job. Sometimes you're just thrown into it. Your parent, your mother, or father may get sick, or you may have a child born and they may have a disability. You don't know. You just don't know what's going to happen. So at Take Care Time, we aim to address these challenges head on by providing practical advice, expert insights, relatable stories that resonate with caregivers from all walks of life. The future episodes will tackle different aspects of caregiving, whether it's coping with caregiver burnout, advocating for your loved one's needs, when finding moments of joy amidst the chaos. By sharing diverse perspectives and highlighting real-life experiences, we hope to equip caregivers with the knowledge, the tools, and support they need to navigate their caregiving journey with confidence and resilience. And we hope to educate and entertain as well. So the next question, it is anonymous. I don't know why this is anonymous, but okay. How do you choose the topics and stories featured on your podcast? So the 2 stories that we have done so far were secondhand stories. Someone told them to me. So what I do is I go in and I change the names and I change the locations, because if it were my story, I may not mind somebody telling my story secondhand. Some people do. A lot of times there's guilt and there's shame behind decisions that you've made. So it's just easier to leave off the real names and the real locations. Unless it's already something in the newspapers or something like that, then I don't mind. But, so far we just had those 2 series, and they've been about family caregiver experiences in choosing the role caregiver, which happens more often than you could know. Sometimes it turns out horribly disastrous, and sometimes it's something that you can bounce back from. So the next question is, what do I hope the listeners take away from listening to the podcast? Increased awareness. I hope this podcast encourages listeners to become more aware of the challenges faced by caregivers and the complexities of caring for individuals with various health conditions. Because, dementia may be different from autism and so forth. Everybody's going to experience something different. And, we hope to get around to addressing all those. So the next question is from Andrea. I think it's DeAndrea. If it's not, I apologize. I'm not real good on pronouncing names. Okay. And she wants to know, what do I hope the listeners take away from listening to the podcast? And I would say that it's increased awareness. I want to encourage listeners to become more aware of the challenges faced by caregivers. A lot of that probably could be solved. As a lot of these agencies and, how do I say this? A lot of the challenges that we face are having to go and try to apply for things, being turned down, not being given enough information to properly apply for it. A lot of times people need help. And if you're thrown into caregiving, you don't know what is your next step. So yeah, that's one of the things. Another thing will be empathy and understanding, which kind of falls under the number 1. Foster empathy and understanding towards caregivers, their patients, and their families. Helping listeners recognize the emotional and physical and the financial toll of caregiving, because there is a financial toll with caregiving. It's expensive. Like that. It's expensive. Provide practical insights and tips, resources that listeners can apply to their own lives, whether they are caregiving for themselves or supporting someone who is a caregiver. Inspiration, of course. I would like to inspire listeners with stories of resilience, compassion, courage, showing them that even in the face of adversity, there's hope and strength that can be found. I would like to provide community and support, create a sense of community and support among listeners, reminding them that they are not in this alone. Everybody's pretty much heard the term that it takes a village. Usually they're talking about raising kids, but even with caregiving, it takes a village. Sometimes one person may know of resources that another person may have never heard of. So, that's a good thing. Advocacy. I've been an advocate for my daughter on many occasions and her peer group as well. I like to encourage listeners to advocate for policies and initiatives that support caregivers and improve access to health care and support services for patients and their families. And a lot of that comes down to voting. And finally, I really want to stress self-care, because that is so important. Taking care of yourself is essential for your well-being and your ability to provide quality care for others. Otherwise, you may end up being the one needing care. Okay, so the next question is from John. It's from a guy. And I will say, I'm just saying that because the majority of caregivers are women. That's just the way it is. But John could be listening for another reason. We don't know. So John wants to know, what advice do you have for caregivers who may be struggling or feeling overwhelmed? That's a great question. I would definitely say seek support. I encourage caregivers to reach out for support from their family, friends, and support groups or professional counselors even. Sharing feelings and experiences with others who understand and can provide emotional relief and practical advice. Great question, John. Prioritize self-care. Like I just said that. I emphasize the importance of self-care for caregivers and encourage them to carve out time for activities that they enjoy. If you give up everything that you enjoy, believe me, it's not going to be long before you're wallowing in depression. Practice relaxation techniques. Maintain a healthy lifestyle and seek respite when needed. It's hard to find respite. I'm dealing with that myself right now. But sometimes you need a break and you have to take your breaks. If you look on my website, there is a blog that I put up a while ago about respite at home. That might not be what it's titled, but that's what it is. It's about finding a spot in your home that's just for you. Like for me, it's my office. I come up to my office. I have a lock on the door. Yes, I have a lock, the key on the door because this is just my space. And when I come in here, I can just feel the weight of the world lifting off of me. So create your, if you can't get outside respite, create a space in your home for respite. Maybe you can have somebody come in for one day a month, just give you a break. You might just want to go on a walk. You'd be surprised how just doing something for yourself makes you exhale as part of the title of this podcast. It gives you that exhale. So another thing would be to set realistic expectations. Delegate responsibilities. I would suggest that caregivers delegate tasks to others when possible, whether it's household chores, caregiving duties, or administrative tasks. Enlisting the help of family and friends or professional caregivers can lighten the load. Don't try to take on everything yourself, or else you will be on the fast highway to burnout. Educate yourself. For instance, I had to educate myself on autism. When my daughter was diagnosed with autism, all I did was cry. She was the first person I've ever known that had autism. I didn't even know what autism was. So I had to educate myself and find out what was available out there. Who can I talk to? You have to go and do that. Nobody's going to do it for you. You have to do it. And if you need to, seek professional help. Don't be ashamed. There are therapists, counselors, and support groups that are waiting for you. They got a seat for you. And you can get some that are specialized in caregiver support that can provide valuable assistance and guidance. Don't be adverse to it. Try it. If you don't like it, there's one thing, but at least give it a try. Stay connected. Don't just disconnect from people. I especially did that during the pandemic. A lot of times connection with people and having a conversation, it could mean the world to you. It could change your whole day. Celebrate your small victories. Don't just go down the rabbit hole and like, oh, woe is me. Sometimes you're going to have small victories. I know when my daughter, she first learned how to say a word, she says a few words now. Those were small victories, but I celebrated those. And I encourage all caregivers to celebrate and acknowledge the small victories. Okay, so I did have some questions about the previous podcast series that we did. It was about Sarah who stole the money from Mr. Johnson. And so someone wanted to know what motivated Sarah to keep stealing money. And I was just telling you, it's gambling. She became a gambling addict. Let me say this. There are not a lot of gambling addicts in this world, but there are some. I'm not ashamed to say I used to play the horses. I used to go out to the racetrack, Del Mar, Santa Anita, and Hollywood Park when it was open. And I loved playing the racetrack. If they had a racetrack where I live now, I would be playing horses. But I'm not a gambling addict. Sarah stole money to keep gambling. This is what she did. She took Mr. Johnson's money and rationalized that she was only borrowing the money to cover her gambling expenses. However, they kept piling up and then she was unable to pay it back. I don't even think she got to that point. So yeah, that is what motivated Sarah. It was her addiction to gambling. So this series was kind of about Sarah's gambling, and it was about Mr. Johnson, who had Parkinson's disease. But, it was his money. So therefore, it was financial exploitation on Sarah's part. Okay. The next question was, in hindsight, what red flags were Mr. Johnson's family? It says, in hindsight, what red flags should Mr. Johnson's family have noticed earlier? And what can other families learn from their experience? Great question, because things always are in hindsight. Mr. Johnson's daughters decision to press charges against Sarah reflect the commitment to seeking justice and holding her accountable for her actions. And by filing a formal complaint and cooperating with law enforcement, they are taking the necessary steps to ensure that Sarah faces legal consequences for her financial exploitation of their father. And this serves as a deterrent to others who may contemplate similar acts of elder financial abuse, sending a clear message that such behavior will not be tolerated. Sometimes you'll see these stories on the news where somebody either stole money or they stole pills or they took advantage of the person that they're supposed to be taking care of. So pursuing charges, it may help Mr. Johnson's family recover some of the stolen funds, maybe. The judge did say that she has to pay restitution. But, of course, Sarah was broke. I'm not going to say broke, but if you're stealing money, you're probably... So, additionally, their overall decision, it demonstrates their dedication to protecting their father's rights and seeking accountability for the harm inflicted upon him. But that's in hindsight. Well, what could they have done to begin with? Because sometimes, you have older parents, they don't think that their money is your business. So they don't want, you all in their business. But looking back on Mr. Johnson and Sarah's storyline, what lessons can caregivers learn from that? The primary takeaway from each episode is the importance of vigilance and proactive measures if the family will let you not take over, but if the family will let you kind of monitor their bank accounts. That's a hard thing. Sometimes parents, they don't want to give up that information. They don't want to give up their driver's license. You're doing it out of love, but they're thinking, oh my God, you're trying to, put me out to pasture. And that's not the case. So yeah, with the person's permission, like Mr. Johnson's daughters, with his permission, could have got their names on his bank accounts or at least had their bank statements mailed to their homes where they can go over it and see where the abuse started. Is this transaction exploitative or, that could have happened. But through the stories of shared listeners are reminded about the prevalence and the devastating impact of elder financial abuse. It's out there. I hear it on the news all the time. By raising awareness of common tactics used by perpetrators such as caregivers and gambling addicts, listeners are empowered to recognize the warning signs and take preventative action. Additionally, the episodes highlight the significance of fostering open communication with your family, establishing safeguards, and seeking professional support when needed. Ultimately, the goal is to inspire and to prioritize the well-being and financial security of their elderly relatives, advocating for their rights, and implementing strategies to safeguard their assets from exploitation. And it's not just Sarah, the caregivers coming over to the house. It could have been a financial advisor. It could be family members. You just never know. Thieves will thieve. Let me put it like that. Yeah. Let me give you 10 ways that you can guard against elder financial abuse. Number 1, stay involved and maintain open communications with your elderly relatives about their finances if they'll let you. If there's not a whole lot of pushback, just get involved with it. Number 2, set up regular meetings to review financial statements and transactions. I would suggest that's done monthly, especially if if they're getting a retirement check or Social Security, something that is delivered to them monthly. Why not set up a review for financial statements monthly? Number 3 would be to establish a durable power of attorney for financial matters with a trusted individual. If it's your parents, if they'll allow you to, that would be a great idea. Number 4 would be to monitor your bank accounts, the credit card statements for unusual activity. Sometimes they would just stack mail. You're not really looking at it. So yeah, if you get something from your bank, your credit card statement, open that up and see what it is and go line by line and make sure it's something that they approved and not some fraudulent activity. There's so much of that going on nowadays. I'm sure you see the news stories. Number 5 would be to implement security measures such as passwords and security questions for financial accounts. And if they'll allow it, have their passwords so you can just kind of look over their shoulders. If you're not in town where you can see, if you guys are not in the same city or even state where you can put your hands on their mail, monitor it online. Number 6, be cautious of unsolicited offers, scams, and requests for personal financial information. Remember one time my dad, I forget the name of the company, but he bought a bunch of these pants. These pants were like paper thin. And Somehow he got on their subscription list. They were just sending him these pants every month. Like, what are you doing? And the pants were just like tissue. They were so thin. They took advantage of him and put him on a subscription plan when he was just trying to order one pair of pants. Those things can happen. Number 7, educate elderly relatives about common scams and warnings of financial abuse. You see it on the news all the time. People are scamming. Sometimes they call and they'll say, we have your grandchild. They're in jail or something like that. They have like a little AI voice, grandma, I'm in jail. Next thing you know, they've wiped out your bank account. So yeah, educate your relatives about that. Number 8, consider consolidating your financial accounts and simplifying investments to reduce vulnerability. Your stuff is with their stuff, if they'll allow it. I keep saying if they'll allow it because, our parents are prideful. My parents are no longer with me, but elderly people, they're prideful. They probably feel like, don't worry about it. I can take care of my own stuff. Meanwhile, you're like Mr. Johnson. You're down $40,000. Number 9 is seek professional advice from financial planners or elder law attorneys on protective measures. They probably have way more information than I'm telling you. They'll probably give you a consultation to tell you how to protect your parents or your elderly relatives. They've seen it all too. Number 10, report any suspicious financial abuse to authorities and seek legal recourse if necessary. I would absolutely have these people charged because otherwise they will just keep on. They'll go from your dad to her mom and they'll just keep going and going and going. It's like they have all day to just steal and scam. So you got to be careful about stuff like that. So those are my 10 strategies. I want to thank and appreciate all of you for coming to our podcast so far. Please like and share, and you can rate it if you want. And I'll see you next week. Until then, take care.